Welcome back to another episode of the Illuminated Path Podcast. I'm your host, Liv, and I'm so excited to share today's episode with you. Before we get into the show today, I wanted to share a little bit of backstory as to how I got this guest on the show, because it really has been a long time coming. So last year in 2024, I hosted a book club. I host a book club for Eno Wellness Collective, typically twice a year. And I always have so much fun picking out what book are we going to read, what content and topic is really feeling exciting and aligned. And when I got my hands on this book called You Are a Magnet, I just knew that this was going to be the book club pick. So as we were reading it, as we were going through the book club, I was tagging the author in it. I was tagging, her in any posts and just reposting a lot of content related to her book, and really just organically started a conversation in our DMs. And so after the book club was done and I was, sharing the book with clients and sharing the book with other people in my community, I thought, you know what, let me just put it out there and ask her to be on the podcast. I have no idea if she'll say yes. She's probably super busy. She probably gets asked to do this all the time, but let's just put it out there. And she was so warm and so open to coming on to the show today. So I'm super excited to have her on. I feel like we connected instantly, and just all of the work that we're both doing feels super in sync and super aligned. So I'm really excited to share this conversation with you. So for today's episode, we have on the show Amber Lyon, who is the founder of Modern Mind, a leading wellness platform. She's a sought-after magnetic mindset coach and the internationally published author of You Are a Magnet, which is a groundbreaking book on how to live a magnetic life. It's now translated into 5 languages. She's originally from New Zealand, but now she's living out in New York. And over the years, she has worked with hundreds of clients to help them create alignment between their visions and their actions, giving them practical tools to realize both their personal and professional dreams. So much synergy in the work that we do, in the messages that we bring out to our clients and to our world, and especially to the listeners of this podcast. So I know you all are in for a treat with this episode. Would love to know what you think of it. If it resonates with you, definitely drop into our DMs and share this episode with someone who you think would love to hear it. So without further ado, welcome to the show, Amber. Welcome to the Illuminated Path Podcast. I'm your host, Liv, founder of Eno Wellness Collective. My wellness journey started with yoga, which led me down the path of exploring healing modalities like meditation, breath work, sound healing, mindset work, and so much more. This exploration inspired my mission to help others find what lights them up. Get comfortable and curious as we learn from experts, teachers, and creators who are lighting up their communities and living an inspired, expansive life. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome, Amber.
Thank you so much for having me. I got a little bit of a rundown beforehand. I always love being able to connect prior to jumping on to record. I am so grateful. I know that we got introduced through the book club and being able to be a part of that experience for your community. And so I'm excited to dive in today, talk all things belief, all things magnetism, and everything in between.
Yes. Even hearing your voice, I listened to the audiobook. I'm like, this sounds familiar. Like, I know you already from listening to the audiobook. And so I'm so grateful to have you here and to get to share your story and a little bit about your path with the ENA community too. So, when I was looking at, obviously I've read your book, but I was looking at your story and your path and your journey. And I find it so incredible of just the timeline of what's happened in the past couple of years for you is really a testament of magnetism at its finest. So, I know that you started Modern Mind in 2018. You started your magnetic method in 2022. And now you have a book in 5 languages. So there's been a huge, shift in your work and just the abundance that's come from that. And so before we get into what you're doing now, I would love for you to take us back a little bit to pre-2018, pre-Modern Mind. I know you grew up in New Zealand, but what was your path before you became Amber Lyon, who you are today?
I always love going back. I feel like the seed's origin of the story is almost the most interesting part. It's the most relatable part. And I think sometimes when we see someone on the other side of some accolade or some achievement, it sort of feels like that gap between where we are and where we want to be widens. And so going back to those origins for myself, I grew up, I think the origin of writing and being called to writing came from my circumstances growing up. And that's why it's so important to touch on and so important to cover. My father was addicted to methamphetamine. My mother was really caught up in trying to help him through that, but also interwoven into, what can be at sometimes an enabling relationship when you have someone you care about and they're an addict, and essentially the emotional throes that can unfold as a family when you're kind of going about your day-to-day life at school, pretending that everything's okay and you're putting on this brave front that nothing's going on at home. And meanwhile, you go home and everything is chaos, and not seeing that reflected in your peers' experiences. What happened for me is now, especially now with the lens of being able to look back and see it more clearly, is I wasn't allowed to speak my truth a lot in my family experience. I wasn't allowed to say, hey, that's not okay with me. I don't like it when you do this, or this isn't the standard that I want for myself in my life when I'm 7 or 8 years old, even though I intuitively felt that. I felt afraid. I felt, scared of what was going to happen. And so from a very young age, writing emerged as this outlet to be honest about what was happening in my life and honest about how I felt about things, and essentially became a means of processing and self-soothing that followed me throughout my teenage years and my early adulthood. I can tell you now, sitting in my closet, there's probably like 6 or 7 fully stacked journals that are now they're so precious to me. Before, I used to hide them under my bed because it was my worst nightmare, the idea of someone finding them. And that's actually where I drew a lot of the inspiration from to start Modern Mind, as an outlet, as a page, as an online diary, so to say, as just my processing of the world and speaking my own truths and noticing that, hey, those resonated with somebody else as well. Before Modern Mind, I was modeling, I worked in property development, I was in the corporate world. I had that feeling that I think so many of us can resonate with, that something doesn't feel quite right. It's good, but it's not great. And I know there's more. And that really sparked that open door of, let me explore what this idea could look like. There's something in me, this dream of wanting to write, wanting to bring these words to life, wanting to share these words with other people. What would it look like if I just honored that desire, even if I had no intention of how this could go or where this could lead, but let me just honor it in this moment, and what would that look like? And that's really what started the page. And for, I think, 4 years, the page had 200, 300, 400 followers, and one of which was my mother, one of which was my sister, some of which were my friends, and it just became this passion project, this love of just being able to not only be honest with myself, but share that honesty with other people in a vulnerable way. And then from around 2022, that's when I got certified. I studied neuro-linguistic programming, which is really, the way in which we process the world, the beliefs that we have imprinted upon us from our childhood. It's the work that I leaned on so heavily to change my own belief systems. Started working as a coach, and that led me to the page growing, the book deal that unfolded, and essentially leading me to where I am today, which is embodying and exploring just these different pathways that feel so authentic to me now. But I do remember the feeling of so painfully aware when you're in an experience that doesn't feel like the full expression of who you are, and craving something more. So it's foreign now to be on the other side of that, and I'm sure I'll face it again. But that's sort of my little origin story.
So beautiful to hear. And there's actually a lot of even, synergy and similarities in our path as well, of having, different varieties of careers in our past lives, and then really listening to this call of like something's bigger and something else is out there for me. And when I think about that, for me, it always comes down to alignment. And once I really started to get into alignment and find ways to align my life, whether that's career, habits, home, like things moved quick, right? Things started to happen fast. And I see that also in your story as well, of like getting into alignment. And then all of a sudden, all these things are starting to grow and be magnetized to you. So I would love to hear where that, I know a little bit about it from the book, but I would love for listeners to hear a little bit about where did the draw to magnetic and magnetism and becoming a magnetism coach, where did that stem from? Like, how did that come to you?
So originally when I was exploring a lot of different work back in 2018. Meditation is a practice I've been doing since I was about 18 years old. It was like 2014. So I'd already been practicing meditation, practicing yoga. I started reading a lot of books in the self-development space. One of the resources that I came across, one of which was Gay Hendricks, who's an author I really highly recommend, where he talks about patterning, subconscious belief systems, how those impact what we're creating. And I started going down sort of this rabbit hole of, okay, well, a lot of this content out of here is talking about manifestation. And that's, the buzzword of this moment, right? Is how am I manifesting? It's become so mainstream to the point that people don't even question. Everyone knows what manifesting is at this point, which is a beautiful thing considering where that was at, 10 years ago, even 15 years ago. It was more of that woo-woo spectrum. And so I followed the path of magnetism. I came across different content, different work. I started implementing, practicing. For me personally, everything comes down to practicality. If there's a spiritual teaching, I need to know it's true by putting it into motion and experiencing, feeling that truth for myself rather than intellectualizing that truth. And I found that things were coming through my manifestation practices, but it felt like this, it felt almost ritualistic in a way. And it also felt like there was a big gap between where I was and what I wanted. So I would, this is especially in my corporate environment, I'd want to be earning more money, or I would want to, get the new car that the certain model of car. It wasn't anything fancy. I think it was like some old school car that, but I'd seen them growing up and I really wanted one. And that was like on my list. And I constantly felt this sense of lack between where I was and where I wanted to be. And then I would get to where I wanted to be, and then I'd feel this desire leap forward again, and then create this new expectation, this new level of, well, I want this thing and this shiny thing and this shiny thing. And this followed me into the realm of modeling. And for me personally, modeling was the mecca of my manifestation journey. It's like, if I book this job, if I sign with this agency, then finally I'll feel worthy. Finally, I'll feel good. Finally, I'll feel confident. Finally, I'll feel worthy of being loved in the way that I'm desiring. And I had some of those manifestations come through and I didn't feel any differently about myself. And I felt almost angry at the world of, manifestation, even though it was working, because I wasn't feeling good while I was creating what I wanted. And so this terminology of magnetism and living magnetically really ties into this concept of, well, how can I enjoy the everyday unfolding of my life as I'm creating more of what I want? And it really infuses joy and presence with manifestation and the melding of those two worlds. And I found that when we're connected to ourselves, our values, what's important to us in this moment, because it changes in every season of life, but when we're connected to our values in this moment, we start creating things really quickly. And I found that not only was I creating things really quickly, I was also pulling in things that I didn't even put on my manifestation list that felt really aligned, that actually called me in different directions. I was open to these spontaneous unfoldings of these paths ahead of me, rather than it has to look like this. And if it's not this, it's not my manifestation. It had this more forceful energy to it. Magnetism has that flow. It has dancing with life interwoven within that energy. So that was how I got led into this terminology of magnetism, because it wasn't just focused on what am I externally creating, manifesting, but how am I magnetizing more of what I am towards me? And it honors that point of creation, right? We're co-creating, but the point of creation is where our 2 feet are. How am I feeling? What am I creating in this emotional experience for myself? And how is that then impacting what I'm creating more of that follows? So that's been that journey of really finding a pathway that's worked for me and then sharing that pathway with other people, that you can feel good as you're creating more of what you want to experience in your life. In fact, you're going to have a lot more fun on the way, and it's going to make those destinations inevitable and also really enjoyable. So why not choose that path, right? It feels like a no-brainer when I paint it out like that versus the leaping forward and the back and forth of don't have, don't have, want, don't have. That energy just feels so disruptive.
And such an important reminder, even at this time of the year, too, right? Where everyone's creating their vision boards of like, this is what I'm going to do. And these are the accomplishments and things that I'm, like you said, manifesting my way. But it is in that process. And this year, actually, compared to previous years, I do have a vision board, but I also have something called a becoming board that I created and had my clients create. That was more of like, what are the daily habits? What are the things that I'm doing on more of a daily basis? Who am I to get to the person that I am becoming, versus like, okay, this is the bucket list on the vision board. It's more of like, who am I in the process? So exactly what you were speaking about, I feel like it was very much the energy of how I was creating that board. It was very much like, okay, how do I, like you said, the 2 feet planted, like what does that person experience on the way to, the higher version or the highest self. So such a beautiful connection. And I love, even though hearing the word magnetism, it just brings up just that, the feminine energy, right? Of just being attracting what you want towards you. And rather than kind of being in that masculine of like chasing or going or doing. So I love that connection as well. So, your book, I really, when I first got it, I was just obsessed with it. That's why I made it my book club book for the wellness community. But what I love about it, which I told the group as they ordered it and got into it, was just the way of it being designed where you can come back to it at different points, right? And that, like, you even explained that in the beginning of like, you can pick it up and put it down and come back to it when you need it. And it's designed to kind of be this guidebook. And so I imagine when you were writing it, and you shared a little bit about it, but I would love to hear a little bit more about your process for writing it. Even like, where did you write it? How did you get into that creative flow to be like, okay, this is the thing that I'm going to put out? Because I know people who write books, they're like, they experience writer's block, or, moments of just not feeling in the flow of writing. So I would love to know what your experience was.
I love this question. It's not something I talk about a lot, and I just love hearing your experience of the book. It just always brings me such joy, just to hear, the other side of that experience, right? When you're writing a book, you're in isolation, you're speaking to someone, but it's a solo journey. It's a very, I won't use the word lonely because it's not a lonely experience, but you're very much in the realms of your own energy, and you're discovering these different parts of yourself. And the beauty of that is, as I discover these different parts of myself and share that journey, I create a path, illuminated path, for someone to potentially discover that part of themselves that they also have. And so it's a strange thing where the more intimate we are with ourselves, the more close we feel with those around us, or can feel with those around us. And I think a truly well-written book is the ultimate vulnerability, the capacity to be vulnerable with yourself, therefore paving the way to the connection with your reader, or to the individual that picks that book up. In my own experience, I feel like I have been writing the book for the past 5-6 years. It had always been a dream of mine. Sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, wait, no, I did. It's written. There it is. It's in my closet. It's on my bedside table. But it had been a dream for so long, and I had so many different drafts, like different Word docs, and I called it the Book of Life. I'd called it Journey to Joy, and I'd put these different titles together. And eventually I just sat, and I was in the moment I was traveling with my boyfriend, who's my fiance now. And I had never admitted it to someone. And I looked across to him and I said, I think I'm going to write a book. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write a book. He's like, amazing, go for it. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to do it in the 2 weeks that we're here. We were in Bali together at the time. It took me a lot longer than 2 weeks. I'll just throw that in. But at the time, I thought it was going to take me 2 weeks, but it doesn't matter. It got me started, and I started pulling together different pieces of writing that I'd already written. And then as things started to flow and I started to sort of see these different thread lines, I started writing the intro and started getting a better picture on, okay, well, what would the content be? What's the journey that I want to take someone on? You know, where's point A and where's point B? And what journey would have desired for myself if I was speaking to myself 2-3 years ago? You know, who would she have wanted to go on a journey with? What would she have wanted to have heard in that stage of life? So that's the lens, that's the energy I came to it with. And then serendipitously, as life happens to work, especially when we're acting in alignment with our values, I had a publishing house reach out to me as I had already started that journey, asking, have you considered writing a book? And would you consider writing a book? And so that opportunity magnetized into that experience because I was already showing up. Prior to that, I had said, you know, when I write a book, if I write a book, and I was almost waiting for the opportunity to fall on my lap. But it wasn't until I decided, well, what does an author do? An author gets up and writes. An author dedicates that time every week to sit down at the laptop and bring it to life. And it wasn't until I decided that's who I was going to be that opportunity came through for me. So I just wanted to illuminate that, because I think, again, that's this energy shift of, instead of waiting for the opportunity, taking action and walking the path and trusting that opportunity will find you as you're in that momentum forward. The process of then writing the book, it was writing and unwriting, writing and unwriting, writing and unwriting. Unwriting just referring to pulling it all apart and then seeing if I could put it together in different ways. And as I did that, different things emerged, like guiding principles. I was like, these really feel like principles to live by. I love the strength of the word principles, right? Something to hold on to in an uncertain time, a principle. And so guiding that softness, that gentleness, but the principle anchoring you in that moment emotionally. And the intentionality of the book is really to empower the reader. It's not listen to me because I know what's best. It's let me mirror back to you my experience so that it can illuminate your own truths to you. And that's really that intuitive guidance at the beginning of the book of pick it up, skip over a chapter, turn to a page that you feel intuitively called towards, because I trust you and you can trust yourself based on the intuitive guidance that you're receiving of what's best for you, what information is going to be most relevant to you in this season of your life. And I think we're really in a period of time right now where we are stepping into our individual empowerment, our individual embodiment of our own truths, our own knowledge, and using other teachers as vehicles to get deeper into our own truths, rather than living according to somebody else's rule book or guidelines. And so my intention of the book is to teach people that their lives can be better in this moment, because they can be, based on how we're seeing them and our perception of how we see ourselves and how we see the world, connecting into that magnetic energy, that things can be easy, things can flow for you, things can really come in serendipitously when you start taking action in the right direction of your dreams and you honor those intuitive impulses, those intuitive ideas along the way. But ultimately, the goal is to have the reader feel empowered by their own truths, empowered by their own guidance. And so the book is a vehicle to do that. And so it changed and adapted throughout the writing process, many of which were days spent in my apartment blasting Elton John or different music. Sometimes I'd listen to classical music on loud, sometimes old school music. There was a little bookstore down about a 15-minute walk from my apartment in Financial District, and I would put my laptop in my bag and I'd just go down there and I would order a coffee, and it was all this wooden interior and leather seats, and it felt like the right environment to write a book. I was like, this is where a writer would write, right? So I channeled that energy, the playfulness of that. Sometimes it was at a busy cafe. Sometimes it was just watching how people were interacting with each other. So it was a melding of let me observe life and write in that environment, and also let me remove myself from the world and just tap into this freedom of being at home when you feel really comfortable to write potentially more of those more vulnerable pieces that are in the book.
I love that. It's like started in Bali, ended in New York, and like a big range of experiences for like environment in between as well. And even as you were speaking, it was reminding me of a part that in the beginning of the book where you basically say like, you know, you can change your life anytime that you decide, right? And like you get to decide at any moment it gets to change, it gets to shift. And that I feel like really landed with me and also the book group that we had, because it is just that simple. Like I'm stepping into the identity. Like you said, I am the writer now. Like I'm doing the things that writers do. Like I am deciding that this is the reality. And then all these, you know, cool opportunities come from that. So what I love about, so I'm a health coach. I've been coaching people through, you know, different transitions in their life, all around, you know, alignment now for almost 5 years. And what I have done with my program is seen, okay, people are coming to me for certain things, themes are coming up, you know, for certain people. And then, you know, over the years have really fine tuned, okay, these are the main things that I want to help and support people through. And I know for you, a big piece of your work is around limiting beliefs and also just, you know, overcoming judgment, fear, that sort of inner critic. And so I would love to know like how that became your focus, if it was something that you had experienced a lot just in your personally, or was it something that also like you started to notice people were coming to you consistently for, just kind of how your coaching program with those focuses came to be.
I love that you see those themes emerge. Yeah, what a beautiful skill as a practitioner to see those thread lines, and as a coach also seeing those thread lines. And I think seeing the tapestry of our shared human experience. So many of us feel, you know, unworthy, unlovable, that it's not possible, it's in reach for other people, but not for us. And the amount of times that I hear that on a daily basis, it's such an interesting thing to see just how potent it is in our own experience, but how shared it is in our human experience. And going back to your question, you know, absolutely, I feel like the seed to light the world comes from the pain from within and having an intimate experience of that. And, you know, with my father being an addict and not being present, and my mother wasn't at the time of my childhood emotionally available. She's changed a lot now and we have a really beautiful relationship. But growing up, I didn't feel like I had anyone to turn to. And as I entered my teens and my early 20s, I went through very toxic relationships where, you know, I was being cheated on left, right, and center, denying it to myself and idealizing and fantasizing about these relationships that I thought that I could be having, or this life that I could be having. But my reality was in such contrast to that. And I couldn't bridge that gap. I was like, how is this possible for some and how is it not possible for me? And I really got stuck in the thralls of the victim mentality in that experience. I felt like it was inescapable. And I remembered in my early 20s this conversation that I had had with my father when I was 7 or 8 years old. And I had sat across on the couch with him. And at the time we were visiting him, and, you know, I never knew where he was living. And it was always, you know, it was a whole mess. If anyone has an addict that they know or been around, it's a messy situation. And I remember turning to him and I asked him, you know, why can't you be the dad that I want you to be? And he said, this is just the way that I am. And I internalized that and I applied that to myself. And I had this moment of reckoning in my early 20s where I discovered that that's not true. We are who we decide that we are. And the habits of our past self have laid the foundation for our current experience. And if I want a different future experience, I just have to lay different foundational habits in order to pave the way, different behavioral actions. Where do my behaviors come from? My behaviors come from my thoughts. Where do my thoughts come from? My thoughts come from my beliefs. And so it started pulling back into this world of, well, what beliefs have I been telling myself or reinforcing that have been leading to these thoughts, behaviors, actions, and outcomes that no longer serve me? And so I started to see the thread line that I could pull on, essentially. You know, it's like asking your mom, how long is a piece of string? I'm like, it never stops. Now I finally get what she means, you know, it never ends. So, you know, as even with my own limiting beliefs, there's always evolutions of them that I come across, but I can recognize them now. I bring that lens of awareness into that environment. And so some of the most common lies that we tell ourselves, and lies just being another word for those limiting beliefs, is, what I mentioned before is, I'm not lovable, I'm not worthy, I'm not capable, people aren't going to love me if I show up in this new way. These are these lies that have embedded themselves into the minds of even children in our society. But so many of us carry, an iteration, one or many of these lies, these misconceptions that we've made about ourselves from our past experiences that we no longer have to keep experiencing. We may have in the past in order to survive in the childhood environment that we were in, but we no longer need them now as adults that are capable of evolving past that point. And so, you probably can feel my passion on it coming through, because I don't want anyone to live telling themselves these lies that are keeping them from what they desire in life. That lie of I'm not lovable is keeping you from that relationship you desire. To me, that's heartbreaking, and I want to help anyone move through that process so that they can debunk that lie, debunk that myth, right? It reminds me of Mythbusters, the TV show way back in the day, of how can we get to the root of where that limiting belief has come from and start to reprogram, start to rewire, start to reframe so that you have another choice available to you instead of that habitual reaction that's keeping you from that experience. How could we choose differently in this moment? And I'm curious for you, what are the themes of those limiting beliefs that you see come through?
Yeah, I've been nodding this whole time because I totally see the same things. I think a big thing that I have noticed as a thread, because a lot of, people, of course, they come to me for a specific thing. Maybe it's they have certain goals around habits or lifestyle, but we do peel the layers and go into relationships, go into mindset, go into limiting beliefs. And so one thing I notice, especially if when people are coming through with potential relationship, challenges, or there's things happening and with the people around them, worthiness is always coming up. Worthiness is coming up all the time, like as a big root to that. Another thing is just building self-trust and like building that as a muscle of like how to walk people through being confident in their ability to make decisions, follow through, be disciplined, right? Whatever it might be, it's creating this like muscle of self-trust. I find that to be a big theme as well. And, in my own personal limiting beliefs journey, I really specifically remember the first time I even did any sort of limiting beliefs work. It was actually at a retreat that I was attending, and the retreat host had us write down basically, what do you believe is possible for you? What are the facts, right? Like the detective, right? Let's look for the facts of, what are the facts that lead you to believe that this is true? What's the evidence? And then the big, like, powerful question was, is it still serving you? Is this belief, even if it was once true, maybe it's not true anymore, even if it is true, is it still serving you? And that is something I always come back to with limiting beliefs, is that choice, right? Of like, yes, you can go back and look at how it got you here, but then that decision of like, and where do we go from here, right? And what do we get to do from here? So that's beautiful to hear your like hands-on, like raw experience with it. And then the piece of now getting to support others, like these huge shifts. If you take that one mindset shift of like that belief that you're unpacking and debunking, that can change your whole approach to relationships, to life, to like, yeah, to making decisions. And so I know you mentioned in a piece of your coaching, and I also saw it in your site as well, around nervous system regulation and subconscious reprogramming. For people who are listening that are like, well, how does that relate? What are we doing here? What does that mean? So tell us a little bit about why those two pieces are sort of a part of your process with clients.
So love that. And, I think these terms have been thrown around a lot, but they're still not in the full mainstream as far as, the explanations that we see online. Sometimes there's like a little description somewhere. Sometimes, it's a more foreign concept. And the nervous system is actually something that I only started integrating with clients over the past 18 months, because I didn't know the power of it prior to that. So we're all learning, we're all integrating. If someone's like, I didn't know what that was. The nervous system and how that plays into magnetism, it has to do with emotional safety. So when we're thinking about showing up in a new way, potentially we're wanting to, for myself, I'll use myself as an example. I'm wanting to be an author. I'm wanting to be a writer. Okay, what does that involve? It involves me sharing my work. It involves me sharing with others that that's a dream that I have. Well, that's terrifying. That's unfamiliar and that's foreign. And my mind has designated unfamiliar and foreign as unsafe. And so the primal mechanism that's happening is I'm going to have a nervous system response to showing up in that new way, because my mind deems it the same level of danger as if I was to see a wild cat when I was, back in prehistoric times where I wasn't safe if I had a threat in my current environment. Because we've evolved to the point now where we don't have those same threats, it doesn't mean that our brain is not operating and perceiving emotional threats in the same way. And so that confrontation that you're having at work, that email that you have to send that feels, asking for a raise, that conversation you're about to have with your partner that feels foreign, but you're trying to express your needs. All of these situations, the brain is deeming unsafe, and the nervous system is putting us into a nervous system state of fight or flight, and sometimes fawn. Fawn is a nervous system response where we're trying to please somebody else in order to regulate our own nervous system. And this can often happen when we have someone that's more aggressive in the household growing up, where we learned where we couldn't speak our needs, or we were unsafe to speak our needs, and we had to meet their needs first and foremost. So just flagging that as a bit of a definition. Fight or flight is that energy of fight. I get aggressive, my heart starts racing, my pupils dilate, my hands start sweating, and I go into that response of I need to attack. And flight is when we usually shut down. Our heart rate still increases in those moments because we're having that nervous system response. But what can happen is we don't know what to say. We're not sure, how to express ourselves. Suddenly our mind is clear of thought, and we had this exactly what we wanted to say to our partner, but then we sit down to talk to them and it's like, I can't even think. What's happening is our nervous system is actually shutting down our capacity to access our prefrontal cortex system, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for reasoning, responsible for regulation, responsible for saying to ourselves, hey, I've been here before, everything's going to be okay, that self-soothing mechanism. So when I learned about the nervous system, I could see the ways in which that could impact our capacity to start taking that aligned action, which is so key to the role of manifestation and the role of magnetism, because we need to show up in alignment with what we want in order to invite more of that energy into our lives. And so the way in which we do that with clients and target that with clients, depending on the certain situation that they're in, is exposure therapy. So through, visualization or rehearsals with people that it feels safe to do so, we start rehearsing what that person may be doing in a less controlled environment, as well as tools like breath work, cat-cow, a sigh can reset your nervous system. So a deep inhale through the nose and an audible is allowing you to go into that more relaxed state. You're slowing down the heart rate. You're allowing your body to ground. You're calming the mind. And so these tools help us bridge the gap, because no longer are we guided by the primal response, the biological responses that are keeping us from showing up in alignment, because we're making them safe. We're making them familiar to ourselves to then show up in that new way. And so that's one of the ways in which it's impacted the work that I do with clients, because if we can make it an experience safe and familiar before we've stepped into it, we save ourselves that fight or flight or fawn response when we step into it. So we activate the capacity to make new decisions. And again, it really ties into what beliefs am I having, what behaviors are following, what thoughts are feeding into that process, and what outcomes are following as a result of that.
Thank you for bringing that. That's such an amazing description of what the work that you do with the nervous system. And thank you for bringing up the fawn definition as well, right? Because I do feel like so much of what we hear and learn about is around that fight or flight mode. And right now I'm in a trauma-informed facilitator training. So we're learning a lot about trauma and, responses, and just that toolkit, that what my teacher calls like a medicine bag of like, these are all the different tools that you have, and just being able to experience breath, tapping, like different movement, dance, like all different types of, things in the medicine bag. It is really empowering to have, and to also be able to share, with clients, because it can be so much in our head, right? We can think and figure out so much just thinking, but there's so much wisdom in the body. And so it's beautiful to hear how you've done it with yourself, and then also sharing it through your programs as well. A lot of the people that might be listening to the podcast, they're coming on this journey with me as I interview different guests of, basically, going down this rabbit hole of let's explore all these different wellness modalities. And then also, how do we practically start to explore and go a little bit deeper? So for someone who's listening that is maybe just like new to limiting beliefs, they're like, I know I need to dive into this. I know I've got some stuff to work through, but I don't even know where to begin. What would you say to like a very, early, just want to dip their toe and start to do this type of work? Where would you say they start?
This is such a great question. And I always love bringing it back down into the fundamentals, right? It doesn't have to be complicated. Even things like the nervous system reset, taking a deep inhale and exhale in the morning is helping you regulate and helping balance even hormones and regulate your system before you step into that Monday morning meeting or have that difficult conversation. So there are tools that are within reach that are more accessible all the time, always. And I always love bringing it back down into square one. So thank you for that question. With that, one of my favorite exercises around identifying limiting beliefs is pattern recognition. And when a friend comes to us and they're on the third boyfriend that's not treating them in the way that they would like, it's really easy to recognize that pattern. Why is she with him? She's so much better than that. And if she just raised her standards, she should walk away. It's so easy to give other people advice in that situation because it's objective, right? We can see it from the outside looking in. It's a lot more difficult to do that in our own experience because we're on this continuum. We can't often zoom out and see the grander picture. And so one of my favorite mechanisms for any client is to develop that skill of zooming out. And one of the ways in which we can do that is sitting down, and I love doing this as far as, relationships, career, health, personal development, and for each of these categories, writing out what are some themes, what are some experiences that I've had in this area or arena of my life, my relationships with others and my friendships. Are there certain dynamics that I find myself in? Is there any thread line that may be laid out between those in the tapestry of my own story? And my finances, do I find myself constantly having just enough, never having enough, or only having, just a little bit more than what I need in order to get by week to week? Is that a pattern? Has that happened just once over the course of this year? Or has that happened month on month, year on year for a period of time? And not from the lens of judgment, but just from the lens of awareness. And we cannot change what we're not aware of. So awareness is always the first step to any change in our lives. So the more awareness we bring to these areas of our life, the more we can start to recognize those patterns. And once we recognize potentially, I tend to attract in, for example, emotionally unavailable partners. It just seems to be there's always something else, someone else, or work, or another relationship, or something that's a barrier between me and them connecting. Where may this resonate or relate to the close relationships I had in my childhood? Was there a parent or a caregiver that wasn't emotionally available to me? And that's when we start to see the seed or the origin of a pattern and a belief. And we can start to pinpoint it back to a certain experience or a certain repetition of an experience from our childhood years. And once we recognize it, it's almost like when you're sitting in a dark room and you see something in the corner and it's really scary. And I use this analogy in the book, but it's like your mind's playing tricks on you. You're like, it's a monster. There's someone standing there. They have a hat on and it's morphing in front of you. When we do exercises like this that are awareness focused and awareness based, it's like turning the light switch on and all of a sudden we can see, oh, the origin of this belief, I can see that's from this experience that I had with my mother or my father at this age. And it demystifies, it makes it practical, it makes it within reach, tangible to deconstruct and redevelop in a way that serves us moving forward.
Wow, so powerful. And I was even just had me thinking about the name. So, Ina, which is my business, is the meaning of it is to illuminate and to shine a light on. And what I love about that meaning is it can be related to so many things in our life, in our health, in our, in our mind, of like being able to actually shine a light on the things that might need some attention, but also not being afraid to go and look at the shadow too, right? And to look at sort of the opposite side as well. So it is such an important part, and even like visual, of limiting beliefs, because it is like getting super curious of like the patterns, the awareness, like taking the thread of like, where did this stem from, right? And with that aha, like for me at least, once I've started to trace back, like, okay, I'm feeling this way because of this, and I can trace it back to this, and kind of going back and finding the origin, for me has really unlocked this sense of like, okay, at least I know where it comes from. Yes, it still might be like a hard emotion to work through, but it's not like I have no idea where, the awareness is there. And it is taking practice of like starting to like slowly build the awareness, and then get more comfortable being uncomfortable, and using like the tools, like you said. So thank you so much for that. It's definitely resonates with me too. So I would love to hear, as we close up our conversation. I could talk to you forever. I feel like you have so much good wisdom and such a relaxing voice to listen to. But I would love to know what comes next for you. I know you have coaching, you have your magnetic app, but what's sort of the next thing that you're magnetizing into your life?
It's still coming fully into vision. This period of my life has been a lot about integration, and with the book and with the app and, with the mastermind. It's a program that I recently just launched, which has been a beautiful group container. And I love sharing conversations with women, especially in just the realms of growing in business and life and relationships, and having that sense of community. As far as what's next, I can feel something brewing in energy, but I can't pinpoint it just yet. And so with that, I'm remaining open and receptive, and just leaning into immense gratitude for everything that is, and everything that's been present, and everything that's still growing. I feel like a little bit like a gardener that's just, tending to the sunflowers that are still growing and blossoming and coming into life, and really honoring that experience of tending to the soil of things, and excited to see what will come next. But I'm really just enjoying the season.
That's a fun place to be, in the like something is coming, but it's in that like in between point where it's not fully clear yet. I definitely have felt that multiple times, and it's like it's an exciting place to be, just on the verge of like an evolution, on a verge of something, a next chapter. So thank you so much for taking the time to connect. I so appreciate it. I know we're working with Guam and New York time zones, which like could not be more opposite. And I know that the Wellness community is going to so love this episode, and I'm going to leave all of the information for people to buy your book and connect with you. But if people want to connect with you, where do you hang out most? Where can people find you?
Instagram, mostly at Modern Mind. It's so funny. Before I didn't plan for, this to be a brand. It's like Modern Mind ____, because like everything else wasn't available. So, you never know what will grow from when you start, and when you honor your passions and honor the callings. But I'm most active on there, as far as just like an outlet and a way to stay in touch and be a part of that community. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful to be a part of the inner community, a part of the book club, to be able to connect with you. I feel like we could sit down, have a coffee, and talk for the next 3 hours. So
Definitely.
We have our time, but I'm really grateful, and thank you for sharing the space with me.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. If you like this episode, please rate and review, and don't forget to subscribe. Learn more at InoWellnessCollective.com and connect with us on Instagram at InoWellnessCollective.